So 3 techniques from anthropology that we should be applying to transformation. Now, the 3 techniques that I want to talk about are observation, description, and perspective. If I want to be a little bit clever, I would say that observation technically should say ethnographic research. Description should actually say thick description. And perspective should actually say emic perspective. But if I'd have put that down there today, we probably all would have gone, what's she talking about? So, in us, for our work in practice, in the world of leading transformation and change, we want to simplify this so that we can apply these 3 highly technical techniques in the design and delivery of whatever we're doing, whether it's a digital transformation for you, Anna, whether it's a leadership program for you, Lorraine, whether it's a cultural piece for you, Joanna. It's irrelevant. We do need to understand these. So let's look at the first one. So the first one, observation. I mean, I'm not being funny, but it's just about hanging out. And so often we head straight to design and delivery without just hanging out with the people as a participant. And I think it's really important for us, even if we're doing it for a small period of time, to go and hang out as a participant with the people who we are serving in our transformation. And it doesn't matter what that means, but it's just thinking about yourself as a participant and giving yourself the time and space and permission to hang out with them. That sounds so obvious, but just as a tiny little stop moment for us all, when was the last time we did that in the design and delivery of something? To actually, number 1, think of ourselves as a participant, and number 2, go and hang out with the people. It's so powerful and simple. Thank you for that. So how do we extract this data in order for us to really, really understand what is visible and what's going on? So there is controlled data observation, naturalistic data observation, participatory data observation, which I've just hinted at, and technical. So let's look at each one of those in a little bit more detail. Controlled observational data is when we are standardizing what data we are capturing. And the way that we do that is we can create a controlled environment. So as a very, very simple example, you might be part of a digital transformation that is moving from on-premise technology to cloud. So it might be maybe an Oracle or an SAP payroll system, an HR system. So you're bringing in a new piece of technology and you're wanting to move behaviors. So what you want to do is you want to understand what those current behaviors are. And what you can do is you can create a controlled environment to capture that data. So something simple that you might want to do is you might want to get to assign maybe 10 people, put them in a boardroom for maybe 2 or 3 weeks and just ask them to work out of that boardroom. So they're doing exactly the same normal behaviors as they would in their natural environment, but you're putting them in a controlled laboratory environment. So it's controlled. And the reason you're doing that is because you are able to then, at various times, standardize and capture consistent and repeated data. So that's a controlled technique that anthropologists use. So it's getting the humans to be in a place where you are able to standardize the data. Now we can do that. It's not necessarily the most authentic, but it does give us a depth that we wouldn't get if we were just doing normal observation or persona work. So it's really, really good one. The next piece is naturalistic. And naturalistic is where we would assign somebody to go into the environment and observe it. And if you've got time on your hands, that is a fantastic one to use. It takes longer, and also the data that individual will be observing will be what we call unstructured. Because what you're asking them to do is you're asking them to document what people say and what people do and how they say it and how they do it in an unstructured way, in a free flow way. So you're not standardizing it, whereas you haven't got checks and measures as you would have in a controlled environment if you've got some people perhaps in a boardroom. So naturalistic, unstructured instead of structured, takes longer, but what we're extracting in terms of data is deeper. So if we've got the time to do it, fantastic. The third one, which is arguably the one that we always want to lean into ourselves, is participatory. And participatory is when we become one of the end users, when we become a true participant. So we live and breathe in that world with them. And if you think about one of the famous anthropologists, which is Fossey, that went in to work with the gorillas, she became one of the community, one of the culture, one member of the family. She was taken on board. What that allowed her to do is it allowed her to get to the real depth of what people say, what people do, in terms of the gorillas, their communication and their behaviors. So the what and the how, what's visible. And that participatory is fantastic if we have time. And what I would say is, at any given moment, it would be fantastic for us to have the opportunity to sporadically go and participate, to immerse ourselves with our users. And it could be a midway point in our transformation, but for us to have space allocated in our transformation plans, in our strategies, in our timelines, however long they are, to have participatory moments, really interesting. Now, I'm throwing out a little bit of a challenge here specifically to Anna, because that is something that would be really interesting for you to think about how you could implement that, not necessarily for yourself, but maybe a member of your team, in terms of key milestone timings across the tenure of a digital transformation. Really interesting. The fourth element is what we call technical, and technical is the easiest data for us to capture, because it is data that we capture from technology. It's data that we can capture from the technologies that people are using, which is probably the most familiar to all of you, because you probably have done a little bit of this in some way, shape or form, right? But the key thing is, can you balance past and present future? Can you capture past and present future, or are you only capturing past data? That's the first challenge I throw to you. The second challenge I throw to you, which actually isn't written down here, which is really important, is, can you capture qualitative data as well as quantitative data? So you can capture how many times somebody went into Teams yesterday, but are you capturing what they are doing when they are inside of Teams, what conversations they are having, how long they are spending in Teams in terms of dwell time? So are you capturing qualitative as well as quantitative data? Are you able to capture real-time data as well as past historic data? And what that does is it gives you a balance of structured and unstructured that you can pull into data visualization. Now, one thing I would say to you is this: it's not about choosing one of these techniques. Anthropologists try and bring richness across all of these techniques, at least two of these techniques. So I would say application of technical with one of the others would be a mandatory for us as leaders of transformation. Real mandatory. So thinking about how we are able to do that. How can we do that? What have we already got at our disposal that can allow us to do that? And then the key is monitoring and capturing this data consistently and repeatedly, not just for the program, not just for the project, not just for this particular phase, but consistently. And if we can start monitoring this data on an ongoing basis, then we're starting to build a much deeper picture to adapt and to pivot over time. So, spiking isn't really what we want to do when it comes to observing our